You've connected to Cisco Unplugged.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cisco Unplugged. I'm Dan Clammer, your host. And this week on episode 44, backed by popular demand, we're covering our back to school best practices. And we're specifically going to be talking about wireless best practices, also the identity services engine, and really getting you prepared and your campus prepared for when students return after the winter break here. So that's the goal here today. So I would like to welcome to the show Gennady Yukovovich. How are you doing, Gennady?
Thank you. I'm doing great.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today. And also, I'd like to welcome back Jesus Herrera. Hey, Jesus, how are you?
Hey, doing good. Thank you. Awesome. to Be back.
Thanks for joining us. And then we have Al Dundai as well. Hey, Al, how are you?
Hey, good, Dan. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you very
That
much.
doesn't look like your normal location.
Yeah, I'm off-site here in the beautiful Twin Cities. Thank you. So before we get rolling here today on episode 44, I'd like to just remind people we do take questions, and we always have a lot of good questions here for the back to school episodes. Thanks for tuning in again. So we use Slido. So you'll see on the screen a way to jump into that Slido and ask those questions. If you're watching on our YouTube as well, there's a link there. You can join the Slido that way. Get ready, get those questions queued up, and we'll be monitoring the questions or the Q&A, and I'll interject some of those questions as we go through and cover the content. So going to that, we also, as a reminder, we do record this, and it will be out on our YouTube channel, our Unplugged channel. That's youtube.com/getunplugged. And you can go and see this episode will be out there. We're streaming live. And then also we've got lots of other great content out there as well. So we encourage you to like, subscribe. That helps not only you get notified when we do go live with new content, but also others find the channel and get access to this content as well. We've got some exciting stuff coming up around Wi-Fi 7 announcements and stuff. So be sure to subscribe to the channel so you are notified when we do go live with that stuff. So I believe that's it. So with that, I'd like to get unplugged here. So Kennedy, let's start talking about some of the latest learnings and software recommendations. Turn it over to you.
Right. Thank you. So we will start with back to school learnings, and our agenda right now is software recommendations, then best practices for ISE and wireless components, and then some troubleshooting tools and some other information. So yeah, thank you. Software recommendations. What is our recommended releases for the WLC and for the ISE? We suggesting to go with the latest on WLC. It's a 17.12.3 and 17.12.4, which is expected to be gold star in few weeks. And then, as you can see here, there is a table showing versions for the iOS XE. So it's a 9800 WLC, which is 17.12.4 and APSP3. There is a version for AirOS also for the Catalyst Center and for the ISE. ISE is a 3.3 patch 3, which is also a golden release. It's already announced. So please stick to these recommendations. ISE-based best practices. Thank you, Jesus. This table, actually, this picture shows a release highlights for the ISE 3.3. For the most important parts, I can call out navigation improvement. That is very important. It simplifies navigation. It's a controlled restart for the certificate renewal caused lots of questions previously, and we fixed that. We making that controlled restart. We also improved. We made some enhancement to the PX grid, direct visibility and context in enhancements. We did a performance and stability enhancement, moving from the synchronous to asynchronous calls. This is quite a step and quite an improvement in ISE. We're doing We also did a new split upgrade release. Split upgrade release, we will talk a little bit later in next slide, but this is a significant improvement in ISE upgrade processes. Next slide, Jesus, please. Yeah, thank you. This table or matrix shows ISE end of life updates. It's very important to keep track on those updates, not to be late. Please pay attention that we approaching, actually in a few weeks, we're approaching ISE 2.6 end of life and end of support, like completely. It's end of this end of January. Sorry, end of September 2024 for 2.7. So it's already happened. For the 3.x releases, we still have several software maintenance releases, and it will also happen quite soon. So note that end of life is for the 3.1 and 3.2 will be quite soon, and please go with Cisco website, check for the end of life updates, and please be aware about that. We a little bit delayed FIPS certification. Yeah, thank you, Jesus. We a little bit delayed due to FIPS certification on 3.3. This is very important GUI upgrade methods that we implemented in 3.2 patch 3. We introduced a new so-called split upgrade, which allows upgrade in batches. Regarding to the previously implemented split and full, there is also a new so-called new split, which allows you to upgrade in several combined nodes, which gives an increased stability and reduced downtime, and it also provides or allows lesser time than old split upgrade. There is no pre-checks, no URT, so all in all, it's a big improvement on upgrade processes. Thank you. With regard to the ISE configuration, best practices and recommended configuration elements, this table is, or this slide is talking about our best practices that we worked on during this back to school this season. So what are most important recommendations is in supported infrastructure, we should be paying attention to recommended specifications. It's a hard drive size, I/O performance of the disk, amount of memory, and virtual memory reservation. This is very important for the stability of ISE deployment. ISE Active Directory domain need to have two-way trust enabled. It's also important. It significantly improves AD authentication speed and AD authentication stability. For the high authentication latency issues that we observed in several deployments during these back to school activities, we noticed that there are some recommendation, and we're providing some recommendation on configuration for the ISE, for the WLC, and for the endpoint components. The key highlights here is fast transition settings on WLC. We do recommend to have it enabled. Keep interim accounting in check. Interim accounting can be very chatty, and so this is what may create a high authentication latency. So that is recommendation. We're also asking to avoid .1x to MAB back and forth flipping. It's increasing amount of transactions between endpoints and ISE significantly. So whenever it's possible, to keep endpoints either .1x or MAB and not allow flipping back and forth. For the high CPU dropped authentications and high latency, our recommendations are we're asking to disable Marcache for node groups and do machine authentication only when it's needed. So if you don't need machine authentication, turn it off. this is to avoid a lot of transactions between node groups inside ISE deployment. Limit syslog destinations. If you have 2, 3, 5 syslog destinations, please revisit that. Do only what is necessary. If you have Splunk or any other syslog destination, external syslog server, make sure that you don't have too many. 2, 3 is okay. More is probably need to be revisited. For the authentication and authorization policies, optimization is a key. There are lots of recommendations how to streamline authentication and authorization process, and that is essential to make it really fast and not to allow any high latency authentication and long steps during the authentication and authorization process. And last but not least is optimization of usage of external identity stores, AD and internal. So if you're using, for example, .1x, authenticate to Active Directory only, not to allow ISE to try internal ID store, and vice versa. If you're doing MAB, it should not go to AD in most cases. Do it internal. It's fast, and it will like separate between .1x, separate between MAB and .1x, and do that in most optimal way. Also, this will ensure minimum latency, normal CPU, and absence of dropping authentications. Guys, if you have any questions, would be happy to get them and answer to them later. Thank you.
Get any quick question on the patches? What's the recommendation for patches? Because right now, I think you said it was patch 3. If another patch comes out, should our customers put that in pretty much right away?
Right. So right now, patch 3 is our recommended patch for the 3.3. When the new patch is coming out, I would allow probably a few weeks to soak it in the field, like see that there is no any significant issues or any other issues that might happen. Like we verifying patches extremely well. It still might be some problems detected, and so I would ask to wait a week or two, maybe 3, until this patch would be really verified, and then yes, to go to the new patch. Also, it depends on whether or not you have any specific issue or waiting for any specific bug to be fixed. So if there is no any bug or feature or any issue with current configuration, do not jump right away to the patch. Like let it run for a while, let it mature for several weeks, and then yes, go ahead and upgrade.
And the other question I had is around, you mentioned your first bullet on that last slide was around scale. And you said HD size, IO performance, knowing this is kind of the back, yeah, they're perfect. The kind of the back to school episode and the challenges around schools. Any particular recommendation about sizing, performance, anything that our customers should be aware of as they're looking at this?
So we have our recommendations in installation requirement and deployment requirement. Those recommendations are based on our tests, and we're measuring performance, we're measuring stability, we're doing longevity tests. Everything is based on our recommendations. We do not recommend definitely to go below that, because customers may experience performance if they are not following to our recommendations. In addition to that, it is very important to make sure that scale is calculated properly. You have your amount of endpoints, you have radius transactions per second, or expected amount of radius transactions per second. If it's a TACAX, so TACAX transactions per second. If it's a endpoint, so number of active endpoints and sessions, or projected number endpoints, simultaneously authenticating to ISE and keeping sessions. I would recommend also to add some number of, to increase this number to ensure growth in the future, to ensure that we're not operating on the very limit, and then deployment will be okay. So stick to our recommendations, make sure there is a room to grow, and make sure that there is like you're not hitting any limit of hard drive for the IO performance, for the memory, for the CPU recommendation, and so it wouldn't. So it should not be any problems with that.
Okay. So in some cases, it might be better to use multiple nodes that are smaller just to get kind of that parallel processing, like multiple PSNs, that sort of stuff, as opposed to one big PSN for something like a school that has these high peak loads and that sort of stuff. Is that
right? So for the schools and universities, we know that it's a very special pattern of authentication flow and transactions. So we do recommend to increase amount of PSNs. It's not necessarily should be smaller. Like, of course, everybody is budget minded, but we do recommend to have adequate amount of PSNs to serve transactions, to serve amount of radius requests and sessions, especially given like, to take into consideration that there is a very distinctive pattern. So by the end of our students just going and moving to another classes, moving between classes, it will create a lot of re-authentications. It will create a lot of roaming transactions, and so definitely some spare performance should be considered to make ISE deployment and wireless deployment in general to be overloaded.
Hey, we have a question here. Sorry to interrupt, Al.
No, go ahead.
Kennedy. What about code and patch recommendations for ISE versions not end of life, like 3.1 and higher?
For the 3.2 and higher?
3.1 and higher.
3.1 and higher. Yeah. I would recommend to go to our recommended release. It's a 3.3 patch 3. So whenever it's possible, not to wait until last moment when the version would be completely out of support, out of live. Like, plan for the upgrade.
Sure.
Verify and then schedule the upgrade.
So 3.3 patch 3.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Along that lines, and I'm going to direct this question at Jesus. So before you start, sorry, but so the slide was already presented. So so like on the wireless LAN controller, what's the rule on like AP service packs, smooths? Should I always be going to the latest AP service pack? Should I always be putting the latest smooth on? And then if I'm upgrading, what's kind of that order of operations? Should I upgrade the software, then the smooth, and the AP service pack? Does it matter? So maybe kind of dig into that. I know you're going to go through a whole another section here, but
sure,
before we that slide.
Right. No, for sure. But we do recommend, at least for these large scale deployments, APSPs are the most critical, since these are more encompassing of different issues. We always recommend to verify that you are indeed hitting a defect that is addressed by either of the smooths or the APSPs. If it's not the case, then for sure you can install it right away. The controller provides multiple mechanisms to allow the upgrade to go without minimal service disruption, which is always a good thing to have on any deployment. The recommendation is always all the SMUs and the smooths and the APSPs are software dependent, or version dependent. So we need to have the baseline code of 17.12.4, 17.12.3, depending on the version that they're running. And on top of that, you can implement Smooth or the APSPs done. Anytime that you're going to do a upgrade, we always recommend to first disable and then remove all the previous APSPs if you are coming from a version that had those installed before moving to the next version, just to ensure that on the new version you start on a clean slate with only the base code ready to perform any patching.
Okay, that's good insight. Thank you. All right, go ahead. You can take it from here.
Hey, Al, we do
Yeah.
have one more question here. Many
Yeah.
of our authorization policies are based off custom logical profiles we create where the policy conditions are radius, called station ends, and this is very specific with SSID and endpoints, logical profile equals or custom logical profile. Is this a recommended method for authorization policies, or should we do it differently?
Is it for me or is it for Jesus?
I think
Well,
it's on
probably Kennedy.
ICE.
Yeah. Okay, so
Yep.
I will try to answer.
Yeah.
It is supported in any case. So I cannot say for sure, like it requires some learning and investigation to see what is the business logic of the deployment, like what is the flows, what is the
Sure.
there are many inputs and things that need to be taken into consideration. So if needed, we can study that and we can come back and provide our recommendations.
Well, yeah, and maybe the better way to ask this question is, you had on the ICE slide, I think the second from the bottom was about optimizing authorization and authentication policies. I guess, where would you point people if I was a customer or I'm a customer and I say, hey, I want some guidance on, optimizing those? Where would I look?
So first, there are steps during the authentication and authorization, and those steps showing with amount of time taken for each step.
Okay.
It is important to understand whether all steps are necessary or not. So how many transactions to Active Directory or to internal identity store are made. This is most expensive, like time-wise, most expensive parts.
Sure.
So are we doing too many authentication comparisons and authorization comparisons? For example, are those steps lengthy and taking too much time? So
Sure.
if the answer is yes, so yes, it should be revisited and optimized. If you overall happy with authorization process, it's not taking too much time, you probably are okay. If your policy has too many authorization policies, like policy set too many, it tends to grow with the time. So maybe it would be a time kind of to revisit it, split into several different separate policy sets, and then to use it kind of manageable amounts of policy with policy set with say 20, 40, 100 policies, authorization policies. It's probably too many. So split would be recommended, and optimization would be recommended.
Yeah,
Great,
I was thinking of them like ACLs, right? So if I have this great big long list of authorization policies, I've got to go through each one until I hit that one that it actually executes against, right? So like breaking that up
Correct.
into a hierarchy so you don't have to go through so many to get to each of those, it seems like it's a lot more efficient.
Correct. So a rule of thumb is like if you can oversee your policy in one screen, it's probably okay. If you need to scroll back and forth between multiple screens and you kind of losing a track between policies, whatever policy is doing, it's probably too many. So again, keep it simple, keep it manageable, and keep it fast, and then it will be fast.
That's a good rule of thumb. All right, over to you, Jesus.
Thank you. Now moving on forward
Thanks.
to the wireless learnings and what we did. First of all, one call out that I want to do it's on terms of default settings, because we know that sometimes default settings are not what we need as a large scale deployment with the use cases that we have for back to school, like in school, colleges, high schools. First of all, I will recommend to have a check into MDNS. What if it's really a service that you're using? We know that as more devices are starting to get adopted, we are seeing an increased number of services that might not be leveraged by most of your clients or used on your day-to-day operations. So ensure that the list does not include any service that you do not need or that you are not planning to use. And if you are going to be using MDNS, ensure that whenever you create the MDNS policy, LSS is enabled. By default, it's disabled, and this will cause a very large response sometimes on services that the client may not be needed because it's not close to enough to it, or then they have to scroll to multiple devices to actually get to the one that's close to their location.
Hey, Sis, what does LSS stand for?
LSS for local services, local service set, which means only services that are within the AP's neighborhood that you are located or where the client is connected will show up to your own device whenever you're searching for any of those.
Okay. So in addition to filtering names, we're also filtering locations now.
Filtering name, exactly. You're filtering on your location based on your AP that you're connecting to. Now, from MDNS, we skip to timers. On the controller, whenever you create a double or a policy set, there will be a different set of timers that you have to keep in mind. First is the session timeout that by default is set to 1 hour, which for some customers, it might interrupt with their cycle of DHCP lease time, or whenever they have to re-auth, if they are moving around, probably they went to sleep for a while, they missed on this re-auth, then they will have to disconnect and connect back again. So we recommend to have it matched to the DHCP lease time that you have, or at least to the time that you project users to remain active in your network and their deployment. And then we move to idle timeout. This is one that's actually good to have on the default value of 300 seconds. We do not recommend it to increase it, because if we increase it, we can run into issues where clients are remaining idle, and then we are holding into those sessions while the client might no longer be there. They might have moved to a different location, and then the controller will hold this information. And whenever it's time for do a session timeout, a GTK rotation, or whenever the DHCP time is done, we will maybe see some IP theft and issues. So any process that requires an active client should have a timer greater than the idle timeout. And lastly, AAA configuration, coming back from what Gennady also mentioned, we recommend to have fast transition. By default, it's set to adaptive, which we are no longer recommending, because now the current clients have the capability to become 11R. So having both fast transition with the setting or DKIM, and for fast transition and non-fast transition devices, it's possible, and it's the optimized. And then for interim accounting, to keep in mind your pattern, if you are really utilizing the policies or any information from this, because in high roaming environments, whenever there's a class change, we can see a surge of these interim accounting packets hitting ICE or hitting your AAA servers, which might cause some of this latency and this slowness whenever they are moving across. And this results as well in a high CPU consumption on the controller, because the controller has to wait for a response from the AAA server to all of these requests that we will be sending out.
Maybe a quick note on that. Also, there are two parts to interim accounting, right? One is basically an event-driven interim accounting, and they're configured at two different locations on the controller. And the other is a time-based. So you want to make sure you address both of those if you when you address interim accounting. One other question while we're here, MDNS. What's your recommendation on MDNS? I mean, if I'm not using it, what should I do? I mean, do I care? Okay.
If you're not using it by default, we can the recommendation is to set it to drop or to disable all around MDNS. We know that if you're not expecting any service to be broadcasted there, then if you have MDNS enabled, the controller will keep processing these services that you are no longer using, that you don't have a use case or a service relying on that. So the setting to disable, it's the recommendation in this case. We need to simplify what's coming into the CPU and what the controller actually needs to process.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Now moving based on this recommendation into what's AP load balancing for CPU processing. We have been over the different software trains trying to keep a better and more intuitive based on how to do the load balancing for AP side tag to WCD CPU processing, coming from the round robin on 17.3 now to 17.9 with the enhanced side load command to create some semblance of expected load and expected number of traffic coming in for each of the site tags to add specific WCDs, doing some load balancing. But this requires some previous learning or previous knowledge of how your network operates. So it requires some tweaking and some iterations. And for that, at starting 17.12, we are now implementing automatic AP load balancing, which leverages RRM and neighbor discovery packets between the access points to ensure that we have a dynamic use of services across your deployment, which should optimize WCD performance and CPU performance. Now you have load balance your APs. Now what's the next step? We have the KPI dashboard tool currently in operation, so you can download and install it. And this tool leverages Python and automation as well as netconf to monitor some key performance indicators on your network for your controller. We can see the number of CPU monitoring for WCD. We can see the memory utilization on some statistics for the memory, as well as client trends on what are the main deletion codes and what are the main trends in terms of traffic pointed to the CPU and radius operations. And as well as you can see any events for your APs and if you are noticing a drop on APs. And this tool will also help you out monitor any other trends over time. Like you can see if your CPU suddenly spikes, it will alert you. And then you can see, hey, that spike relatively fast and then went down, it spiked and stayed up, or it was a gradual depletion of memory over time. And you can correlate the different performance statistics and pointers that we have defined here on your own network. Now, you got the alert that you have a high WCD usage. Then what's next, or how are the actions that you can check? Since we are also monitoring different sources of traffic, you can determine or categorize the different common trends that we have seen. Probe packets being sent or R packets being sent, we can set the polisher to limit this type of traffic. For AAA traffic, we can see if there is enough. We can do load balancing probably between our servers and ensuring that fast transition is enabled on the double lines to reduce the amount of interactions or transactions going to ISE. Similarly with interim accounting, then we can see also if the MDNS queries are coming in that are for services that we do not leverage, and then we can work from them. We can see if there's SNMP traffic that's coming in, which type of OIDs. We need to revise which type of OIDs we are polling and how frequent they are polling. We need to ensure that the controller has the sub-agent cache enabled in order to optimize the responses from the controller. And also, we can see if the number of clients is increasing. So a high amount of roaming. So for high amount of roaming, we have 17.9.5. Onwards, we have an improvement on how to handle this large set of associations, and also ensure that you have very balanced or you're load balancing properly your APs across the WCDs. And never forget to to verify that you have client exclusion enabled, because there are very few untargeted clients that are sending high loads of traffic, which will make the controller utilize those resources. And if we can hold off on those by using client exclusion, then to investigate why they are failing to connect, that will alleviate the performance for other clients that are capable of connecting properly. Now, coming in after those trends, coming into some of the issues that we saw across this period, this last semester. First was an issue with sustained high CPU usage whenever 11K was the controller was receiving high amounts of 11K updates with no BSSID. This was seen only in 17.12.3. In order to recover a reboot or a switchover, will address this, and we have not seen any recurrence after the switchover. Or alternatively, you need a quick fix and you cannot do a reload. You can move APs to a spare controller or move them to a different site tag, and that will address the CPU temporarily. There is an investigation going on here, and if you have seen this pattern on you, you can open a tag case, collect the metrics that we require from the Troubleshoot Wireless LAN CPU tech article, and then that will give us enough data to help you identify if this is the case and how are the next steps here.
And I think this is particularly good to understand the WNCD process for back to school, right? Because we have that same sort, like we're talking about with ICE, these peak loads. We have that same sort of event here on the controller. We have a lot of AAA traffic, the bell rings, AAA goes through the roof, right? So I think it's good to understand this. I mean, in many cases, many controllers, you probably don't, I mean, if you don't know what a WNCD process is, that's okay. That's good, right?
For sure.
But in some cases, you may need to understand this in those graphs and that sort of stuff that Jesus was pointing out will be a big help for that. So,
for sure. Now, going into more AP-related issues, one of us that was very was seen frequently, it's the 491XX APs going unresponsive on the 6 and the 5 GHz band. Sorry, not the 6 GHz, the 5 GHz band, where we will see the AP beacon, the SSID, but anytime that a client will try to authenticate or connect to it, it will be unable. It will be able to connect to the 2.4 GHz radio. And if you reboot the AP temporarily, or if you set a crash or see a crash on the radio, then that's when the AP might recover. But over time, we might be running into the same condition. So this was seen exclusively on 17.9.5. If you were especially seen on deployments that upgraded from 17.9.4, where the issue was never seen, to 17.9.5. But if they move instead to 17.12, any of the branches, 17.12.3, 17.12.4, the issue was not seen either. There is a bug track for this, where we see that the APs do not send any reply to any management frame. The recommendation would be in this case, if you are seeing this very frequently, it's to move to 17.12.4, which is the recommended release. And that will alleviate the issue, that you will not see the issue again. Or if you are interested in some RCA, there is a set of steps that we can run on 17.9.5 to get more information and address this issue on your deployment for 17.9. Now, another issue that we saw spread, it's the 9166 APs having slow speeds whenever the clients were connecting to slot 2. So these were 9166 are usually deployed on 4 high-dense environments where we see multiple clients trying to connect. And since we have the 2 radios available for 5 GHz, then that allows better client distribution for the single AP. However, if the clients were connected to this slot 2, we will see slow downstream speeds and missing a lot of retransmissions on the access point. If the client connected to the slot 1, same environmental conditions, the speeds will be 10 times faster. If even this issue, once the AP enter into the bad state, we will see, even if only one client was connected to slot 2, we will see the slow performance. Rebooting the AP, similarly here, help to temporarily recover the service, but over time, we see that the clients also start to get degraded speeds until it goes back to under 30 megabits per second speeds. We have a bug file for this. We are still on the RCA stages. So if you notice this on your performance, open attack case refers to us, and we will be able to help investigate and further troubleshoot this performance. Now, after moving from the learnings, we are also continuing with investigations on the 6E standard adoptions. We recommend a single SSID for both Wi-Fi 6 and 6E deployments using transition mode for WP2 and WP3. So whenever you create a network, enable 6 gigahertz, ensure that PMF is set to optional for both sets to be operational, then ensure that WP3 is also enabled with the appropriate status for fast transition and the out key management. And if you're using instead a pre-share key instead of .1x, we recommend to use SAE along with fast transition SAE. Same recommendations of having 6 gigahertz in order to perform a good transition model to now getting greater use of your 6 gigahertz band. A reminder that standard power for 6 gigahertz is now available in the US. AFC is starting supporting 17.12.3, 17.14.1, and 17.15.1 have AFC capabilities for all of your 6E APs. Ensure that in the US, 80 megahertz is the channel bonding, and 40 megahertz is in Europe, and always use PSC enforcement. And with the standard power, the recommendation is for indoor deployments where you notice that where you can get most of the SP, if you notice some coverage holes before, ensure that you have enough GNSS modules so that the calculations are appropriate to all of your access points. And that this is also just a requirement for external antenna IPs and outdoor APs. AFC is mandatory as it needs to have a standard power on those mailboats of APs. Lastly, it's a quick rundown on some of the extra wireless troubleshooting tools that we have available. First is the wireless config analyzer. A very good improvement. It keeps improving with adding more of these recommendations, best practices, and signatures of what we have been learning. And also the newer version of the wireless config analyzer has a visualizer for you to see how your APs are distributed to WNCDs and how many clients are at that moment when you took the show tech. We also have the KPI monitoring script, which is similar to dashboard, but it has more on using the EM capabilities of the controller. And it's more of a collection of all the data for you to later analyze and verify trends. And the Cisco Support Assistant extension in order for you to get contextualized information of your controller, of the settings that you're trying to enable based on the learnings from TAC and intellectual capital created by them, as well as an easy way for you to add or manage your cases by pre-populating information into your TAC case so that all information is ready to go and be analyzed. For that, I'm open to questions.
Yep. I got a quick question.
I have
for
a
you.
question here that came in. It may be for Al or Jesus, but it's around WPA3 and with 6E and 7, the customers struggling to understand the impacts of what this will mean for their network. Will you be providing guidance on how big deployments can turn this on without cutting off or orphaning older devices that we have no control over? So I will also, before I let you guys answer, if you jump back in the Wayback Machine and go back to episode 4, we did cover WPA3 and some of this, but we'll also address this here. Go ahead.
So I think in a lot of cases, it can be very specific to your environment. So first, let me say, engage your your SEs, your TSAs, in that particular account, because any information we provide here is general, right? And there may be something specific to your needs. For most cases now, we're seeing turn on, obviously, when you go to 6 gig, and I think probably everybody knows this, you have to go to WPA3. There's not an option, right? In the past, we used to say 2 different SSIDs, one for WPA2 and one for WPA3. So we didn't want you really transitioning back and forth. And this was actually the question I was going to verify with the SUS. I believe it was 1712 that we introduced transition mode, correct?
Right. Yes, 17.12.1, it's when we implemented transition mode to ease configuration.
Yeah. So if you're running, 17.9.4, you probably still want to go with that older model, right? If you're running 17.12 and up, we can go with this model that Jesus is showing here, where we can basically have the client transition back and forth automatically. And there's some purists in the industry that don't like that, and some that, this is the best thing since sliced bread. So again, your mileage may vary based on your particular installation. And then the other thing, of course, we always recommend is don't salt and pepper, right? Don't put your 6E capable or 7 capable APs, side by side with your non-Wi-Fi 6E 7 capable APs. I would say Wi-Fi 7 versus Wi-Fi 6E is not quite as big, as long as you have 6 gigahertz on both of them, that's more important. It's better, even with Wi-Fi 7 and Wi-Fi 6E, I think, to keep them together. There are certain features and functions in Wi-Fi 7 that will only work if you're operating in Wi-Fi 7. So some of the MLO features and that sort of stuff. So again, better to not salt and pepper them. But the big thing, I think, is that, the 6 gigahertz edition was the big boon from a wireless standpoint. So making sure we can seamlessly roam across those APs in that environment. You don't want them bouncing back and forth between 5 and 6 and 5 and 6. So you want to make sure that 6 gigahertz APs for sure are grouped together, and non-6 gigahertz supporting APs, so Wi-Fi 6 and below are together. I think from a coverage standpoint, again, a lot of that depends on what your current status is, where your power levels are, and your existing APs. We have some calculators we can help you with that, get you an idea. Certainly, any of the planning tools can help with that. So that's just another avenue. And then, Dan, to the point you brought up earlier, there's several episodes on Wi-Fi 6E, like from an RF perspective, rules and regulations, and how that would impact that. So I think there's a number of look back at some of the previous examples on the channel here, and I think you'll find some real good information there. I don't know, Sus, anything you want to add to that, or any thoughts?
No, I like basically you cover most of the bases. Just want to ensure that also the transition mode has been proven to avoid clients moving to this back and forth or moving into this. We have noticed that as the standards have progressed, we also have the clients that have progressed on their capabilities of remaining associated to a specific band or specific protocol. These recommendations have been also done on some large events, Cisco Live or in Vegas, where we see above 90% of customers or clients' devices connecting to these WPA3 instead of WPA2 and leveraging these higher benefits of the 6E.
Yeah. Another thing you have shown here is that fast transition status, right? We used to, I think, recommend fast transition was not necessarily enabled. It was
Adaptive.
Optional. I don't remember the exact term. Yeah. But now it's, I think we're pretty much across the board recommending this is enabled. We're running that at all our major events too, like Cisco Live, as Jesus was saying. So I think that's another big kind of, it wasn't the point of this slide, but it's certainly called out here and worthwhile to talk about. So. Okay.
All right. I don't see any other questions, so I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Again, the spirit of this episode is really around making sure that your campus, your students have the best experience back when they come back to school, in this case, after winter break, making sure that you're on the best code software recommended for your instance. So thank you, Gennady, Jesus,
Thank you.
Al. Really appreciate your time going through all this. I think it's another great episode. These are always very popular. And again, thank you to everyone for tuning in. And again, if you want to go back, you want to look at this, you want to look at, hey, I don't remember exactly what was covered on those slides or what we have that this is recorded out on YouTube, youtube.com/get unplugged sorry, the @ get unplugged. And you can go out there, look for episode 44. It'll be out there immediately after this. And you can go back, pause, look, and go through any of the content we shared here today. And like Al had mentioned, and I'd mentioned, we have a lot of other great previous content out there. So if you do go out there, be sure, if you're not, subscribe, like this episode, like the channel. And when you subscribe, you're notified when we do go live. We run these episodes every other week at this time slot and cover lots of great stuff. If you do want to reach out, if you have any questions after this or something comes to mind, you can reach out to us via email, getunplugged@cisco.com. You can also reach us on the socials at Twitter X at Unplugged80211 or on Threads, Unplugged Connectivity. So with that, I again want to thank everyone, and until next time, stay connected and unplugged.
Thanks.